The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Today we're kicking off a three-part series entitled Older but Wiser. For the typical high school senior, applying to college can be a very stressful process, from maintaining good, if not stellar grades, to studying, preparing, and eventually taking the appropriate standardized test, to starting, completing, and submitting the multitude of questions for multiple school applications. It can become very overwhelming trying to manage the entire process, and more importantly, one's expectations, all the while trying to be a well-rounded individual. With that in mind, the process can become even more overwhelming for older students who aren't between the ages of 17 and 22. In fact, according to a 2012 study by the National Student Clearinghouse, 38% of all post-secondary students in a fall term are adult learners deemed over the age of 25. Aside from the demands and stresses mentioned above, adult learners have other factors that take up their time, such as work and family. In fact, the adult learners group is often overlooked, and it continues to be an understudied topic in post-secondary research. This is somewhat concerning in light of the fact that the percent of adult learners attending college on a full-time basis has been steadily increasing. With us here today to provide their perspectives on the topic are the following guests. Meghna Sarma is an incoming MBA student at the Leonard Stern School of Business at New York University. She earned her undergraduate degree in economics and political science from NYU and her JD from Fordham Law. Next to her is Pamela Kavalam, who is a student services administrator at NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. She has a BA in English and Women's Leadership from Douglas College at Rutgers University and an MA in Higher Education Administration from NYU Steinhardt. And finally, we have a returning guest to State of Mind. Dr. Priscilla Rogers-Fahy is an Associate Director at the Counseling and Advisement Center at Borough of Manhattan Community College. She received her bachelor's in psychology and social behavior from the University of California, Irvine, and she received her master's and doctorate in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology at San Diego. Meghna, Pam, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to start off our conversation with a question for you, Dr. Rogers-Fahy. What factors prevent an adult learner from going to school after high school? Why are they in that situation that they're in now?
It's a really great question. I think that there's various reasons why people don't, either decide to take a break. Sometimes they tell me they have an elderly parent at home. They may have sick children. They may have decided to have children right out of high school, and so that's also a reason why they're not able to come back right away. Some of them have to work to support the family, and so they're putting off school in order to just help the household, those kinds of things.
So it's typically life experiences, life unexpectancies, so to speak.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, in that case, what are factors sparking interest to go back to school on the same vein?
Well, that I really like. It's usually now, like, my kids are older or they're grown up. Sometimes they tell me they now have kids that are in high school and looking to go into college, and so they want to sort of be the person in their family to sort of show their student, like, sure, you should continue to go on to college, and this is something that you'll enjoy doing. I think that also they've realized that in some of the job markets today, it's very hard to sort of move up without the college education. Right. And they themselves know that they can do it, and they're saying, now all I need is this degree, especially in like health-related fields and things like that.
Sure. Now, Pam, you actually work specifically with graduate students, but are some of those themes similar to what you're seeing at Wagner School of Public Service?
Yeah, I think the reason that people go to graduate school is for a specific reason. Like, getting a professional degree, you need it. It gives you skills that you specifically need for to get ahead in your career. So when I ask my students why they came to get their MPA, they give specific reasons about where they see themselves after they graduate. So they're kind of looking at what their gaps are, and they're using graduate school to fill those gaps, not only in your classes, because specific classes like program evaluation you can use directly on the job. But also the network that you get is so important, because those people in your classes and the faculty and even the staff that you work with, those are the people that are going to help you get the job that you're going to get at the end of your degree. So I would say that most people go to graduate school not just because, not for fun really, but because for a specific reason, to get ahead in their career.
Sure, absolutely. So taking a real life example, Meghna, you are actually going to be attending NYU for your MBA this coming September?
Yes.
So what was that process like, going back and applying to multiple schools, filling out multiple applications, taking standardized tests? Take us through that thought process as a wife and new mother, correct?
Correct. So basically, my thought process about business school started maybe 3 years ago. Okay. And I was working as a lawyer at a nonprofit organization. I've always wanted to do human rights, and that's the reason I went to law school. I was finding that in my current position, there was a difficulty to move up, and I wasn't having the impact that I envisioned for myself in human rights. Mm-hmm. So I started to think about different opportunities or different ways to have that impact, and I started looking into social entrepreneurship. And that kind of sparked my interest in an MBA, because I lacked any finance or business education in my undergraduate and in my law school. So it was a difficult decision. I spent a lot of time talking to individuals in MBA programs. I weighed the benefits and the costs of going back to school, because it is expensive, there is a time commitment. You are also sacrificing time in your career. So that's kind of those factors that I had to take into account. And as you mentioned, I was also pregnant or planning to have a family at the time. So figuring out how to schedule all of that was definitely challenging. I think what helped me is talking to people and really figuring out that this was the next step for me to get to the next part of my career. And that was into social entrepreneurship.
Okay, so taking the mindset of where you are now versus when you were probably 22 and applying to law school, what factors were important to you when you were applying to business school?
So for business school?
For the business school itself.
For the business school itself. So for me, I think that when I was younger and applying to law school, I didn't do the research very well. Okay. Not because I wasn't diligent about it, mainly because I didn't know what the questions I needed to ask were. Okay. I was younger, I didn't have the experience, I wanted to do human rights, so law school was the next logical step, or so I had heard in undergrad. So that's why I applied to law school. For business school, I was a lot more targeted. I wanted a school with an entrepreneurship program. I wanted a school that was into social impact. I wanted a school that was close to home, because I was expecting a child and my husband had a job here. I also have my family close by, so I knew that when I started school, I would need their support. I'm lucky enough to have that situation. But it was definitely a large factor in deciding where I applied to school.
Okay, so let's take that thought and extend it a little farther. I'm sure there was challenges when you were going through this process. What were some of those challenges from a professional standpoint? You were obviously doing very well at the firm you were at, but you felt the need that you had to leave that to go better yourself academically to get a better job down the road. How is that conflict within yourself played out? Because that is an opportunity cost you are giving up.
So professionally, I really enjoyed my position, but again, it was a small nonprofit, and it was actually a very niche position. Okay. So it was actually difficult to transition to another organization working in the same capacity. That was one factor. The second factor was I wasn't doing exactly the work that I wanted to do, and I didn't have the skills that I needed to do that type of work. So that is why an MBA became an option. Professionally, in terms of working in in a legal capacity, I didn't tell any of my supervisors. Nobody at my nonprofit knew that I was applying to school. So that was a little challenging to balance standardized testing and the work demands, and also getting recommendations. Sure. I couldn't ask my direct supervisor, because that would potentially impact my salary, potentially positions. Nonprofits are grant funded, so if they got wind of maybe me leaving, there might be a problem in that sense. So I just had to be very scheduled, and that's why it took a couple of years to get to this point. I scheduled my GMAT. I did move it a couple of times because It just wasn't, I wasn't hitting the scores that I wanted to hit because I couldn't dedicate the time. And I definitely had to come to terms with the fact that I wouldn't be practicing law in this capacity, even though I did like my job, but I didn't see the trajectory at my current organization, nor did I see it outside of my organization.
Okay, so Dr. Rogers-Fahy and Pam, at the adult learner and graduate level respectively, are those some of the themes you hear from students in terms of how they prep themselves coming to BMCC and Wagner?
Definitely. I think that, you know, this deciding to come back to school is a definite decision that one makes for themselves, and they finally have a place and they have the space in their mind to actually say to themselves, I'm now ready to come back and I'm doing this for me. So there's like a very strong self-motivating force behind that, wanting to do it and go back. But it definitely takes time and to be scheduled, and you have to be almost at the right place at the right time.
Right. And the professional challenge, Pam, do you find that with some of your students that it's a little bit covert, trying to apply?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you said that you hadn't told your supervisor about it, because I tell my students they absolutely have to have a conversation with their supervisor, because there's no way to be successful if you are not doing that, because some of our classes are at 5 p.m. and you have to leave work at 4 or 4:30 to go, and sometimes students will take days off from work to study for finals. And you really need to make that space for yourself. And even I tell my students who have children to do that with their families too. So with their kids running around, it's really hard for them to do work. So I say, go to the library, go to a cafe and do your schoolwork there, and don't expect that you're going to do it when you get home, because it's really hard to do that, and then you're kind of not giving either of those things your full attention, and it just stresses you out. But yeah, just setting those expectations for the people in your life really helps in terms of the classroom. So the students that have had challenges, it's not because they can't do the work, but because they're not giving themselves the space. So they've made time for the actual classes, but they haven't made time for recitations or tutoring or going to see the professor or doing group work or making assignments. There's so many hours of work. Sorry to scare you about that. But you went to law school, so you know all this. But yeah, so there's a lot that goes into going to graduate school that's not just being in class.
Okay, so I want to continue on that thought about the personal aspect. Before we do, I just want to clarify, you were actually going back in a full-time capacity to your MBA.
Capacity.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk about the personal stresses. You now have a child. At the time you were applying, I think you were pregnant. Now, what were there challenges? And if so, how did you deal with them?
There were challenges in making the decision.
Okay.
Because I'm a first-time parent, so I'd heard having a child is very time-consuming, sleep deprivation, these are all things. So it was a little frightening to think about going back to school while having a somewhat new child. He's about 9 months now, so when I go back, he'll be about a year. So I have talked to a lot of people. I've even talked to mothers who are at school, and a lot of them gave me advice about being scheduled. I even talked to other students, and they said parents are the best study partners to have, because...
Elaborate on that. Why?
Yeah.
Because even in business school, so the average age, at least at NYU, was about 28.
Okay.
So some people are newly married, they're engaged, maybe even a little bit younger. So they're in a different frame of mind at that point. They're not balancing all these personal stresses. They may be balancing their family commitments, their fiance or their friends in city if they're in the city, but they're not balancing taking care of a child.
Right.
So parents have to be so scheduled that if they're in a study group that meets at 7, it has to end at 9, because at 9 o'clock you have to go home and you have your other responsibilities. So a lot of the students told me that it was amazing to have a parent in their study group, because it forced them to have to do work in those 2 hours.
Okay. Do you see that theme with students that have children, Dr. Rogers-Fahy?
I think that they have to balance both, and I think that that's what makes them so great about coming back to school, is that they're very, I think that at times it's hard if your family doesn't quite understand why you're all of a sudden going back to school, and that's usually when they come into the counseling center, is because they feel very stressed and they don't know how to balance both and those kinds of things, and we sort of come up with skills of how to be regimented towards, like, this is for you, and it's now time for you to take care of yourself and those kinds of things, but I think it's hard to balance both. Okay.
We're going to get back to support circles in a second, but I do want to ask the one thing that really goes to the academic aspect, Meghna, and it's like kind of like an athlete. You have to physically get ready for a race. Talk to me about the academic preparation. Are you ready to go back to school, classes, homework, No,
I'm scared. Honestly, I'm scared.
Okay.
It's been 6 years, almost 7 years since I've been in an academic setting.
Sure.
I've never done math before, actually since undergraduate.
Okay.
So it's been quite a while, and I will be taking business and finance courses, which is math intensive. I have just learned that if this is what I want, then I will dedicate the time and balance all my other commitments to get it done.
Okay.
It's daunting, but it's also exciting at the same time.
So take me through the process of preparing for the GMAT, the General Management Admissions Test.
Yes.
What was that like?
Stressful.
Okay.
Again, schedules really helped. I dedicated time after work, time on the weekends. I had a support system. My husband would, go out, and so he would give me time to study. So he would be understanding that we couldn't spend time together during that time. I didn't have a child at the time, so I didn't have that added stressor. But it's just having the support circle around you really understanding and supporting you in your decision. Okay. It took about a year that I prepared for the GMAT, so I know a lot of students going back to school, for the MBA at least, did it in a very short amount of time, took the GMAT within a month or a couple of weeks. For me, that was not feasible, given working, given not having had math in a very long time, so I just gave myself enough time to ramp up and get to that place. I also anticipate buying books in advance of starting my MBA and seeing if I can read through them and just get a little more acquainted with the concepts, just to help me out and help my stress levels when I start.
Right. All right. So let's talk about social support circles, both professionally and personally. Dr. Rogers-Fahy, in your experience at the Counseling Center, what's a typically successful support circle for a student? What type of support do people in their lives have to provide them from a personal standpoint to allow them to flourish, not just get the degree, but flourish in their degree?
I think that it takes a lot. Definitely, friends, having friends that understand that you're going back, a family that's supportive. Some are tied very much to their religious organizations and some sort of religious affiliations. Some have mentors in the community, might be even people that they work with who are really like their cheerleader, like, no, we support you, go back to school. Because you really do need a strong, support circle in order to sort of make time for all these other things, because you have other people maybe watching your children or coming in and helping you so that you have time to study or get to class. And so they find that their families are if they have a very strong, family support system, that tends to be really, really well for them.
Okay. And Pam, from a professional standpoint, for students that decide to go to school and also keep their jobs, how do you build a professional support circle from people that you can trust, mentors, co-workers, potential bosses? Is that possible, and have you seen that successfully implemented?
Yeah, I think the important thing to do is to show the value of the degree to your team, especially to your supervisor.
Right.
Because there's no way for you to spend the exact same amount of time and energy as you normally would if you weren't going to school, because some of your mental energy is going to go towards going to school. So your job is to make sure that your supervisor knows that and knows what you're bringing back to your office. So a lot of our classes actually do directly relate to what their work is, and that's why they're going to get their degree. And so if they're able to make that clear to their supervisor, then that helps them succeed. So one of my students, she actually told me that her supervisor has an MPA and told her to get one, and that when she finishes the degree, she'll automatically get promotion just by finishing out the degree. So she's working hand in hand with him to figure out which classes will be the most beneficial in her job. So not everybody has that kind of, great
exception versus the norm.
But I think it definitely is. The tangible skills will make you a better employee, and you just have to make that clear to not only your supervisor but the rest of your team too.
Okay. So Meghna, talk to me about your support circle, personally and or professionally.
So I think I've discussed going to an MBA for a couple of years with my friends and family. It was definitely a decision that I did not take lightly. Mainly because, again, it's expensive, there's time involved, and the new child, again. My husband was very supportive of it. He had told me to go get an MBA in 2009.
Okay.
So I needed to go through my own journey to get to this point and realize this was the time in my career that I wanted to pursue that degree. In 2009, it wasn't right for me. I was still wanting to explore the human rights path within law as as people know, that was the time of the financial crisis, so things were particularly difficult to navigate the waters in law, in business, all around the economy. So that was also very, you know, it was my decision at that point that I should wait and see out. I just gotten this degree. Why am I going to go back to school immediately? And I think that was the right decision, because those couple of years that I spent working, trying to find my way in law, has really influenced and given me very great life lessons now going into an MBA. I'm a lot more focused about what I want out of this degree, whereas in law school I wasn't exactly sure.
Okay. So from the standpoint of where you are right now, is there anyone you've spoken to professionally? I know you say you didn't really disclose it to people at your job, but is there anyone, maybe a coworker or someone that wasn't necessarily in the same department as you that you've spoken to about going back to school?
I've talked to my coworkers about it. I didn't want to put the organization in a bad place by my leaving, so we have I work as a legal advisor at the International Center for Transitional Justice, and so I spoke to my coworker about it. She was very supportive about that. A lot of my peers are also struggling with what the next step is because they themselves also don't necessarily see their track in their organization or outside. A lot of them are considering supplementing education or different areas of interest. So we often talk a lot about what the next step is, and that's actually very helpful. It's great to have a group who's also similarly thinking about what the next step is professionally to bounce ideas off of and talk to about these.
So we think about like the 2008 financial crisis, and the financial industry got hit, the legal industry got hit, and we did see a lot of people consider going back to school. Dr. Rogers-Fahy, Pam, are schools equipped more so than ever now to really understand adult learners and the specific needs they have, or are we still figuring it out as we go?
I think that, BMCC had a great answer to that. They have an early childhood development center here on campus.
Oh, really?
And so they offer, childcare throughout till, Monday through Friday, day and evening and weekend. So I think that, we saw a lot of boom in like online classes became much more, acceptable and sort of take all these online classes, and we all have online e-tutoring, which is amazing. So if you can't even come to campus because you don't have time. So I think that we found the answer is sort of like by using technology and being able to just be accessible, evening hours, especially for those that had to continue working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and weekends. So there are some students who are, they come to me and they say, I'm sorry, I can't come during your hours of, that you guys are open because I'm only here at night or on the weekends.
Right.
They're geared towards those kinds of things, or online.
Okay. Pam, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because after the 2008 recession, the numbers of students going to grad school went up a lot.
Of course.
Because a lot of people are out of work, so they're going to graduate school. So I guess it was good for us in a little bit, but it also made us focus a little bit more on getting students interested in their own professional development. So we have our own career services office. So I think Stern and maybe the law school and Wagner are really unique in NYU that we have our own office.
Okay.
So we have a dedicated office that works mainly with public service type positions and really knows that field very well, like international development. So we really focus on getting students interested in that kind of thinking about the professional development and internships right from the beginning. So even in their first semester, they're thinking about that. We have a course called Composing Your Career where it's a non-credit class where students are mapping out what their professional, what their career trajectory is going to look like and how they're going to use their classes, their extracurriculars, everything to make sure they're in the right place. So it's really about giving the students the resources and the support to make sure that when they graduate, they're in a good place. Or they maybe already are graduating with a job. So the way that our system is we don't have a part-time, full-time program. It's pretty fluid. So if you take 2 classes in a semester, you're a part-time student. If the next semester you take 4 classes, you're a full-time student. So it's really up to the student how they want to shape the program, and it's geared towards getting people the internships and the jobs that they need, and partnering that with the grad program.
Okay. So Meghna, when I asked you at the beginning of the episode, what your search process was like, where did concepts like student services, career services, counseling and advisement, did they take any precedent in your application process? And 2, how did you consider them, considering where you are in your life right now?
I
think what really took precedence rather than counseling services was the network. I talked to a lot of MBA students across schools about whether the alumni is active in the school. I think one thing I've learned through going through the financial crisis and getting this position that I have now is that networking is extremely important. It's an extremely important complement to education.
Okay.
And so when I focused, I didn't really look at the counseling of the school per se. I did look at the network of the school in the student body. Okay. So if I asked a student, can you contact alumni? Do they respond back to you? I wanted to hear favorable responses about that.
Sure.
Because I have seen in a lot of my other friend circles and myself is that meeting people and talking to them about their career and then putting you in touch with the right people is really how to get that next opportunity and to expand your network. So that's really what I focused on. I myself didn't focus on counseling, but I do know a lot of other students applying who had.
Okay. And does that also consider, when you say counseling, that included student services, per se?
Yes, some people.
And what about career services?
Career services, I mean, I've had a difficult time getting information. I think sometimes it's a little difficult to figure out what's true and what's false.
Okay. Talk to me about that.
So in law school, for example, we graduated during the financial crisis. So
Sure.
Obviously, the numbers were not that wonderful. 9 months post-graduation, a lot of students weren't employed, a lot of them were laid off.
Right.
So schools have, sometimes a way for students to segue into their next career, internships at the school. So
Sure.
that's one component that I found in my law school that they had. And in law school, for me, it wasn't particularly helpful, my career services.
Right.
Mainly because it was public interest, it wasn't necessarily the school's strong suit. They did have resources, but it was difficult. At the same time, I will take responsibility that I was younger. I didn't
Sure.
know how to leverage those resources.
Okay.
So it's kind of a duality. So when I talked about career services, I wonder when they say, we help you do this, we help you do that, is that the answer? Is that the real answer? I think you get a lot more when you talk to students about their experience with their career services and how they've helped them get their job.
Okay, so let me ask that question back to our two friends from the academic world. Do we do a good enough job from the academic standpoint of marketing student services, career services, counseling and advisement? Is that something that's part of the application process that schools put out front, especially to the adult learner population?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so at Wagner, we're a pretty close-knit group. We're a pretty small school. It's about 1,000 students, and we have about 40 staff. So we all work together very closely. So with the admissions office, our team works with them extremely well. So I'm an academic advisor, but I go to open houses. I go to Admitted Student Day. We're really a part of that process because we offer a lot of advisement specifically for individuals. We do walk-in advising. We do a lot with the alumni as well. So we have a really robust career services and student services team, and we want that to be a selling point for us. So we make that definitely part of our admissions outreach. So, but I don't know if that's the same for every school. Like if a school doesn't have a strong advisement team, they might not be advertising that. So. So yeah, but that's really interesting that you're saying that you weren't able to find that kind of resource because you think that's part of the admissions process. But yeah, that's really interesting.
I guess I'll clarify that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I wasn't able to find that.
Yeah.
It's just when I spoke to them, I feel like I got information that was in pamphlets or that I could have gotten online.
Okay.
I wanted the real story.
Yeah.
How does career advisement really help you get to that next step, whatever job that is?
All right. Dr. Rogers-Fahy, how about the BMCC with its students? How do we make sure that people know about you and your department?
Yeah, we do a lot of outreach, and then that's part of their freshman orientation. Is we offer like all of these. Advisement has definitely grown in the last semester. They got a lot of new advisors, something that they're really geared for this upcoming fall and summer. We do always early advisement, trying to get people in their classes as soon as possible. We advertise a lot. You see how we have a lot of ambassadors around our school campus that are students, and so that you, as a student, you would feel comfortable going up and saying, "What's the inside scoop?" or "What could I learn about?" Because those are really your peers, and those are the ones that are going to tell you like sort of the ins and outs. But we're definitely out there, not only on the website, but I definitely feel like we're all a part of the orientation process and trying to get students involved as soon as and early.
Excellent. So as a final parting thought for our episode, I'm going to ask each of you the same question. If one of our audience members was thinking about going back to school as an adult learner, what's one piece of advice you'd give to them? And I'd start with you, Meghna.
Talk to people.
All right. Pam?
I'd say figure out what your skill gaps are.
Okay. Dr. Rogers-Fahy?
I just say welcome back.
I like that. Fair enough. It has to be a nurturing environment. Well, on that note, thank you so much, all three of you, for providing your unique perspectives on the topic. I really appreciate it. That's going to wrap up our show for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can reach out via email or Twitter. And if you'd like to know the ongoings of State of Mind, check out our website at www.bmcc.cuny.edu. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.